Hey everyone, my name is Goff, and in this training video, I'm going to educate you on how to wholesale a pre-foreclosure. This is actually easier than you think, and as you pay attention to the training, I think you'll agree. I want to first thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this training video. I couldn't tell you how many people that have wanted me to do this training, so here it is. Now, this training works for the person that doesn't have money or access to money, as well as the person that has money and they're looking to get a faster and higher rate of return. Now, this particular training, I'm going to show you how to do it without money because I learned a long time ago that if you only know how to make money with money, what happens when it's all taken away? That's right, back to square one. Now, for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Goff, and I've been in the trenches as a real estate investor since 1998, and I'm a real estate investment expert. I've closed over 500 deals. I work multiple strategies. I've trained thousands of beginners, investors, celebrities, and sports athletes, and pretty much everybody in between, as well as being a two-time best-selling author. You know, one of the sayings that I came up with some time ago was real education for real people. And what I mean by this is, how many times have you been to a seminar, read through a workbook, or even watched a YouTube video, and the presenter never seemed to clarify or educate you on the business? They tend to sell you into the next big thing or show off their fancy sports cars, and heck, they'll even show you 5 testimonials of someone that did it. Then you hear, hey, I'm just an average person, started with nothing, and now look at them. Well, look, I like nice cars. Heck, I have a yacht, live in a big house, and I live a pretty good life. Yes, I struggled and failed and failed and failed, and now I've become one of the most sought-after educators in the business. And I realized that most people can talk about real estate, but not many people can actually teach it. You see, I'm going to educate you, give you everything that I have, use my experience, and break it down in a way that will make sense. I do this because I'm passionate about helping others. And hopefully one day when you're a successful real estate investor or business owner, you'll do the same. All right, let's get started. All right, now with wholesaling pre-foreclosures, there's a couple of different strategies that were actually working. And at the same time, you need to understand what the heck is a foreclosure and how does this process even work. So in this particular training, I'm not going to go through the long training process of what wholesaling is. I would encourage you, if you're just getting started and not sure what wholesaling is, we have an awesome 3-part series inside of REI Pro as well as on my YouTube channel that I would encourage you to go visit that training so you can understand exactly what the wholesaling business is. Now, I simply define it as the quick turn business of locating properties, usually needing repairs, at bargain prices and quickly passing them to investors or landlords at prices well below retail. So generally speaking, we would just go out and we would find a distressed property. We would then put it under contract. And the interesting part, I think, even though we're not really selling the house, we're actually selling the paperwork. When I learned that years ago, I was like, okay, I'm in. I didn't even know if it was legal at the time to do this. But wholesaling has been around for years, guys. And it's a great strategy. But just keep in mind, don't just necessarily look for those boarded up windows like this particular property. There's a lot of times where I think we get confused on what is it that we're actually doing. I think we look at it as just ugly properties or nasty properties that we're passing along, and that's not always the case. See, in real estate, I've learned this, you're really not finding the house, you're finding the situation. The situation determines the condition of the house. The situation determines what the price is going to be on the house and all of these different things. So I really want you to understand that wholesaling is really just finding a property at a discount, and then you're going to pass that along to somebody else that's ultimately going to purchase it and rehab it or do whatever they want with it. So here, what we've done is we found a property and we've put this under contract at one price, and now we're actually assigning or selling our interest in that contract to somebody that's going to actually buy it, typically being an investor or a landlord. So that's wholesaling. So like I said, I encourage you guys to check out the 3-part series on wholesaling. The next part of this wholesaling pre-foreclosures is the actual foreclosure piece to it. So, a foreclosure is a legal process by which a borrower in default under a mortgage is deprived of his or her interest in the mortgaged property. This usually involves a forced sale of the property at public auction, with the proceeds being applied to the mortgage debt. Look, people go through this every single day in every area of the country. People lose their jobs, they health issues. There are numerous situations that people go through. And we just don't live in that perfect world. And unfortunately, even though I would say that this is, a negative situation for the owner, this could really be a turnaround point if they get to find out who you are and how you can actually help these people before the property goes to an auction process or eventually becomes bank owned. This is a really, really important part because not many people actually know how to do this. They don't know how to get a hold of an owner before the auction. You think about all the investors that wait for the auction. I mean, they were literally just inspect the outside of these properties. They'll analyze these properties all the way up until that auction date, where this particular business, we really want to get the property prior to the auction, because once it goes to auction, now we're actually changing strategies. So I want to go through some of the basic foundation pieces of the foreclosure, because it's really important for you to understand this entire process and where do you come in. So I like to look at it as a clock. And if we look at the number one, the very first thing that happens is what we call a pre-foreclosure. And this is the point where the homeowners fail to make that first payment, second payment, and they know that they're going to be in trouble. They are the only people generally that know they're going to be in trouble besides the bank that is obviously hounding them and calling them and saying, hey, you missed your payment. But something happened with the seller, and now they're in a pre-foreclosure. It's not like these owners just run outside and say, hey, look, I'm in pre-foreclosure, behind on payments, just wanted to let you know. No, this is just happened. Now, it hasn't gone to public yet. Okay, so we're going to get to that. So they fail to make payments. The bank then starts the foreclosure process. They get it. Hey, look, this owner is not going to be making any more payments. We need to be proactive and start this foreclosure process. Once they do that, this is the important part, is now it becomes a pre-foreclosure. So when it becomes public, that's when the pre-foreclosure process is known to us as investors. The only way that you'll be able to find people that are in a pre-foreclosure is if you have some material out there, if you have a website where this person, hey, look, I'm behind on payments, I'm not sure or understand the process, and they Google it, they find your website, they go to your website, you teach them a little bit about the process, you fill out a form, and now they can contact you. Now, obviously, we want to find them as quickly as possible, because the further that this process goes on, the further they get behind. And those are going to be those what we call back payments. So those back payments are going to increase more and more each month. The late fees are going to incur, the attorney fees are going to incur, and this whole process is going to become more expensive. So I get it. Look, hey, we need to find these people ASAP. But generally speaking, we really won't know until this pre-foreclosure goes public, and that's the pre-foreclosure process there. Next, what happens is what's called a demand letter, and then a Lis Pendens, which is Latin for lawsuit. Then there's a complaint filed. Then there's a default, and then there's a final judgment. As you can see, there's a lot of moving parts here. And then at the 9 o'clock, we have what's called the auction. Now, generally speaking, when this is filed publicly in the pre-foreclosure state over at number 3, they generally do set the auction date. Now, it could be 30 days, it could be 60 days, it could be 90 days. This is all really dependent on the bank themselves, but to keep it simple, they generally do schedule an auction date. Now, we want to work with the people before it gets to auction. So once it becomes public, or even prior to public, this is our job. This is our goal. We got to get in there. We got to find these people, because look, they're going to lose the house. If they don't make up the payments, if they don't make some type of arrangement with the bank, they're going to lose the house, which is going to damage their credit. So the next process After the auction is what we call bank owned. So the bank makes the minimum starting bid at the auction. If nobody outbids the bank, guess who won the property? The bank. So that's what we call an REO, real estate owned or bank owned. After that, there could be a right of redemption, just really depends on your state. So this is what I would like to look at as the foreclosure process. Now, keep in mind, from the auction date up, I made it red. That is the danger zone. It's gone too far. But at the same time, this is really good for us as investors because now time is of the essence. And the owner is going to need to make a decision with you. Now, why in the world would the owner ever want to go through that auction process? Number one, it's going to damage their credit 7 to 10 years. If they did what's called a short sale, which generally happens prior to the auction, it's going to damage their credit for 2 years. How is that actually helping people? I don't know. So the only way I know how to help people is to actually get in there, make up the back payments, and bring the loan current. That's going to stop this entire process. To me, that's going out there and helping other people. Now, focus on this piece right here, and we're going to actually run through a search, and I'm going to show you how to search for these leads, how to analyze these leads, how we profit from these leads, how to connect all these dots. But focus in on the pre-foreclosure part. That's when it's made public to all of us, and that's generally where we're going to find the most pre-foreclosures. The next part of this, believe it or not, is what we call the seller financing strategy. Anytime you work with a pre-foreclosure, it is seller financing. Pre-foreclosure is not a strategy. It's actually a process that somebody goes through, where seller financing is the actual strategy. Wholesaling is the actual strategy. So when you seller finance, and if I say owner finance, seller finance, it's all the same thing. Properties from sellers. You could buy as many properties without a credit check or applying for a loan. This will allow you to buy as many properties as you get your hands on. This is obviously one of the best parts about seller financing is getting the owner to finance it for you, which is nothing more than a piece of paper and what we call terms. See, wholesaling, you base everything off of a cash price or one lump sum price. But in seller financing, everything is based on what we call terms. How much down, how much a month, and how long can I do it for? So when the homeowner actually purchases the property, and just think about the house that you have, if you have a mortgage, is you put down a down payment, you make monthly payments, and you have a term. And you also realize if you live in the property for 30 years, you're going to pay 3 times the amount of the property value anyways, right? So you already know you're paying more just by simply getting it on what we call terms. People do that because they don't have the cash to necessarily buy a $400,000 or $500,000 house to live in. So we're going to be using all of these different strategies, wholesaling and seller financing, and then combining it into this process of what we call foreclosure. So one of the agreements, and the only agreement that you're going to use in this type of transaction, is what we call wraparound agreement. I know a lot of you have heard that term before, but basically what we're doing is creating a new note wrapped around the original note on the property that the owner has with the bank, and in different terms. Now, generally, when I work with pre-foreclosures, I just like to take over their payments. I don't necessarily want to create a higher mortgage amount than what's currently owed on the property, but there are times where you find a property that has a lot of equity and the owner wants to make something off of it, and that's not usually a problem. So we would create what's called a wraparound agreement. So anytime, just to keep this simple, you seller finance a house where the owner has a mortgage on it, this is the agreement that you're going to have to use. Now, one thing a lot of people bring up is what's called the due on sale clause. And this is the paragraph of the mortgage or deed of trust, which gives the lender to call the loan due if they find out the deed has been transferred without their lender's permission. This usually requires the buyer to pre-qualify. Now, prior to 1989, you could walk out of jail and take over someone's loan. You didn't have to qualify. Obviously, today is a different world, and people do have to qualify for these loans. Now, how would this affect my business? Well, it will make it difficult to transfer properties that have such a loan in place. The buyer can't assume without qualifying, thus potentially removing the best sales tool to move these houses quickly. But the real question is, will the lender actually call the loan due? Usually no. It's rare that a lender will call the loan if the payments are current. However, it's possible. Most lenders do use a third-party company to process these payments, and they rarely enforce this due on sale clause anymore because the process of calling loans due is just not profitable. If you think about it, that's exactly what they're doing with somebody in pre-foreclosure, right? So they are calling the loan due. You have failed to make payments. You have breached the contract, and we're going to take back the property. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Do you really think the banks are sitting there going, whoa, wait a second here? Now, John Doe owns the house, but I keep getting these checks from Chris Goff. We better investigate this. No, what are they doing? They're just cashing the checks. Now, I have to disclose this because it is possible. But think about this. Why does the bank want the property back? They don't, right? So if we could bring the loan current, we can then sell this property off to an investor that's going to fix this property up and put it back on the market and close everything out. Everybody's going to be happy. I can tell you personally, not one bank has ever called the loan due. None of my attorneys have ever had a client that's ever had the mortgage company call the loan due. Has it happened? Yes, but it's 1 out of 10 million. And think about this. You're not going to have this property for very long anyways. So it really doesn't matter. What matters to me more is helping somebody out of this situation. And that's where I know I have the knowledge, I have the capability of going in and working with people in this situation and actually fix the problem, which everybody's going to be happy. And I think you're going to agree with me as we go through this presentation. And you'll realize how many people you actually help in this one way of doing real estate. A lot of people have heard this called sub-twos, subject to existing financing. I know a lot of people out there online try to turn this into a strategy. Sub-two is not a strategy. It is actually a sentence in a seller finance agreement. So don't get convinced with these people that a sub-two is actually a strategy. Seller financing is actually the strategy. And a lot of times, especially when somebody has a mortgage, we always use this clause. When somebody doesn't have a mortgage, you don't use this clause, but it's still seller financing. But the definition, when transferring title of a property encumbered by a mortgage lien without paying off that debt or assuming the note, you are taking it subject to. This is in line 203 of every HUD-1 settlement statement. It reads this and basically means you're promising that you will continually pay on the existing financing, but if I don't, I'm sorry. That's really all this means. So don't get too tied up into thinking that this is an actual strategy, because it's not. It's a sentence or clause inside of what we call the seller financing strategy. All right, so next thing is I just want to kind of clear the foundation. You want to learn a little bit more about the seller financing strategy. We've got an awesome training series in REI Pro as well as on my YouTube channel. And again, we're taking two strategies and we're blending them together to make this work. And I'm going to show you how to do it without money. But again, if you have money, then you wouldn't need to wholesale it because you would be that person. But there's a lot of people out there that just don't simply have the funds to get started, especially if you live in an expensive area. If you live in an expensive area, you're just getting started, you can't invest in real estate without using a strategy that doesn't require money. So this is going to work for everybody. This isn't something that just works for one person or the next. If you think about it, this is really a strategy that helps other people. And what better feeling will you really get, than going out there and helping somebody in a desperate situation? And think how many people actually even know how to do this. I can tell you 99.9% of the investors have no clue on how to do this. And that's why I want to teach you. That's why I guess people have been begging me to teach you guys this. So the next part of this is how do we find these particular properties? Well, there's a few different ways. You could obviously advertise like we talked about before. You can advertise and have a website and run Google AdWords campaigns. You can run Facebook ads. There's a lot of different things. You got to watch the language on how you advertise this, though. You can't come across as though you are a consultant. Look, you're just looking to buy property. And if you're in one of these situations, we're just looking to buy property. And that's how you really want to come across. You don't want to get into this whole foreclosure scam crap out there. You want to stay away from that. And it's really in the wording on how you market this. Next is word of mouth. Hey, my brother's best friend is in this unfortunate circumstance and he can't make his payments. That's that word of mouth piece. So as I even tell my personal coaching students, look, you just need to talk about what you do, and you talk about what you do to everybody. I remember when I got started, and the more I learned about this business, the more I became addicted to it, right? So the more I became addicted to it, I was to the point, look, if you don't want to talk about real estate, don't come talk to me, because that's all I wanted to talk about was just real estate. And that's that word of mouth, and I honestly do believe that that's what helped propel. It was like a snowball effect. It took me about 3 months to do my first deal. And keep in mind, I had no idea, no clue of really what I was doing, but I was getting out there and I was just doing things. And I didn't do them right. I didn't do them perfect. I didn't have all the perfect answers. I was just out there doing it. And that's how I learned. The more mistakes that I went through, the faster I learned it. And to me, that was a blessing. And so talk about what you do. Obviously, we check the Lis Pendens at the courthouse or where they record all these records there where you live. And then, of course, the REI Pro software, which obviously many of you already know how to do this. So those of you that don't know about REI Pro, or even if you are in REI Pro, we're actually going to run a search. And I'm going to show you how I actually search for pre-foreclosures, how I look at the numbers, how I analyze it, and all of those good things. If you're not on REI Pro, there's the website. You do get 30-day free trial. So how about if we just jump right into it? I'm going to change gears here. We're going to run through into the software, and we're going to run a pre-foreclosure search. So let's get to it. All right, now that we're in Lead Pro, what I want you to do is click on pre-foreclosures. Obviously, you're going to pick the area that you live in. I'm just going to type in an area that we're actually going to be conducting our last event of the year at Fort Lauderdale, and I'll just pick Hollywood. Again, you could pick multiple counties, multiple cities, multiple zip codes within your search so you can really find as many as you possibly can, and then you could go back down and filter these to the list that you are maybe just more targeted. We're going to go ahead and hit Search Leads. Now, as this is loading up, you're going to see a map here at the very top, and this is just personal. You could really do this for any kind of property, but I want you to go to property types. I just want to search for single family at this time. It's just kind of my little bread and butter, but if you want to search for commercial, you could do that. Or maybe if you're in an area that has a lot of apartments or condominiums, townhouses, things of that nature, of course, you would want to keep all of this selected. But for me, in this particular example, I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm just going to choose single-family homes. Now, pre-foreclosures to me on price, as you could see, you could set a price. To me, the price is not all that relevant. The reason is because you're not buying it for that $1 million value. You're not buying it for that $5 million value. You're taking over the property for whatever the back payments are. Now, obviously, the more expensive the house, typically the mortgage would generally be higher, which would create a higher back payment amount. But for me personally, I just want to see everything, and I want to work with everybody because you never know. Think about this. You're not actually doing it, okay? So you're going to be wholesaling this pre-foreclosure to somebody that is capable of doing it. Sure, you could look at it from the point of view that, hey, the more expensive the house, the pool of buyers come down as investors. Sure, but how many times can an investor come into $1 million property and make $500,000? It's unlikely that they will. So this is a great way for you to just go out there and find these properties. And don't be scared of price. I know when I got started, one of the main reasons I moved to Texas at the time was I couldn't believe you could actually buy a house for $40,000. See, growing up in Northern Virginia, you couldn't even buy a bathroom for $40,000. So to me, price is not all that important. Again, you could filter it down by beds, but I want you to click the More button. Now, this part is important, okay? So baths and all that stuff is not all that relevant because I get it. Look, some investors, they only buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. But what happens if you could buy a 2-bedroom, 1-bath and actually where the numbers make sense? See, you should always fall in love with the numbers, not the property. Now, generally speaking, yeah, 3-bedroom, 2-bath is going to be ideal. Most investors will want it. Got it. But someone's going to buy that 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo. And if you buy it right and you could get it at the right price, someone will buy it. So to me, it's almost irrelevant. But again, you can always narrow your search criteria right here. A couple of things that I do. And there's not too many, but there's a couple here that I want you to focus on. Absentee flag, to me, is not relevant in this situation. I don't care if the person that's in pre-foreclosure lives a street over or they live 3 states over. It's the situation that I'm looking for. See, the situation never changes. No matter where they live, it doesn't change. Now, if you're just direct mail marketing absentee owners, yeah, you could split these up and you would think somebody that lives further away would become more motivated. But guess what? We already know the motivation. It's called pre-foreclosure. They're getting ready to lose it. So to me, in this particular case, doesn't make much sense. Now, generally speaking, go to auction date flag, show me all future auctions. And just so you guys know, and I know you guys have been in REI Pro for quite some time now, we do go back a year. And the reason why we go back a year is because your county has not told us that the deed is actually transferred. And until that deed has transferred, we're going to keep showing it in this status. It's almost like it's just kind of hanging out there. It doesn't mean anything besides the county has not reported to us that anything has transferred. Now, there are times where homeowners do make plans with their bank. But generally, these are plans that are very short-lived, meaning that the homeowner agrees to make maybe half the monthly payment. And this probably goes on for a few months and the bank allows it and it's just kind of hanging out there. And unfortunately, they usually end up losing it anyways. But there are times where homeowners actually get back on their feet. They borrow the money from a family member or something. Maybe they were just in between jobs, whatever the case may be. We show the properties that go back a year, and that's because the county has not reported to us that anything has changed. Now, one thing that is important is the ownership flag. I want you to choose remove company-owned properties. This will help eliminate anything from look, LLCs and investors put properties in LLCs, then they get in trouble and they go through the same process. It's just harder to find those people. And remember, time is of the essence. We have up to the auction date. So generally speaking, I want to deal directly with the homeowner. I want to deal directly with that person I know that I can contact quickly. If you mail something out to a corporation that's in this pre-foreclosure process, who knows how long it's going to take for that one person that runs this corporation that's responsible for that property to even read it. And by that time, the auction date's probably already passed. So generally speaking, I want to deal with people that I know that can make a decision. LTV, so this is loan to value percentage. Now, let me explain how this works because it works actually in a couple different ways. Generally speaking, just a normal property. What it means is how much potential equity is in this property. We take the original loan or multiple loans if there's more than one loan on the property at the time that it's taking out. And we also look at what the current potential value is of the property. Obviously, we take what's in between. Now, I want you to keep this in mind because a lot of people get confused about this. If the loan was taken out in 2008, well, they've obviously have been making payments on it. It's 8 years later. So the potential equity is actually going to be greater than what we can show. The problem is that you can't get access to people's interest rates and term of loans to really amortize these loans to give you a loan balance today. Now, that's one way. The other way is if we know what the actual judgment amount would be, especially with a pre-foreclosure. Now, some counties actually disclose this and some counties don't, okay? So when the county discloses the judgment amount, and this is generally the amount that is owed with late payments and attorney fees and loan balance and all that, then we take that amount. We also then take the current value and hey, what's left over? Now, when you're working with pre-foreclosures, you have to work with properties that have equity. Trust me, you do not want to take over somebody else's problem, okay? So I like to put in here 20 as the minimum. You don't have to put a percent symbol, but just 20, okay? So just show me the properties. Number one, show me the properties that have future auction dates, meaning that's going to allow me enough time to contact the owner and work with them. And number two, show me properties that have at least 20% equity. Now, when I go hit apply, obviously the number of leads is going to come down. Now, what I would encourage you to do, and depending on where your county is and so forth, it's going to be different for everybody. Sometimes it's going to be once a month where your county says, hey, we only disclose these records once a month. Some are on a weekly basis. It's just different. So what I've done here is actually really have narrowed this list down to show me. And I want to use this first property on Cleveland Street just as an example to really walk you through this process. So what we have here is you can check the details, tax info, you go to the mortgage history and all that great stuff, but it's our foreclosure tab. So the foreclosure tab, we're going to have as much information on here that we're being told. Okay, like I said, some places don't simply have, if you look over here to the right, a judgment amount. And unfortunately, we have to take the original loans on there to try to calculate equity. Okay, at the end of the day, look, you need to get a payoff statement from the owner. You're going to have to find out all these numbers and verify. But right now, we're just kind of looking for properties at this particular moment of time. Now, again, we could use direct mail to send these owners some information about what we do. Making phone calls is another way of doing it. Promoting this online and so forth. There's ways to market these people, and obviously we have an internal direct mail system that you could do that. You could either send a letter, which we have some preloaded letters if you want to do that. We also have the postcards as well. Now, if I want to work this lead, I can just simply add it to my properties, and then I can start that workflow. But all in all, what are we doing? We are finding properties that are in pre-foreclosure, and I would encourage most of you, and some states are different, but most of you, I would want you to check this on a weekly basis to find out what new pre-foreclosures have just been listed so you can immediately start marketing them. Because if you think about it, this property is going to auction on May 17th. So we have now till May 17th to actually get a hold of the owner, review the property, look at the property, all of those good things, and actually package this deal. Okay. Now, if you only have a few days to auction, you don't have much time. Generally, you'd probably want to just wait till the next batch of them. But when you get this system down, this really does not take a lot of time. Okay. We can really get in there and within a day or two actually close this deal. It doesn't take that long. But again, we got to get the ball rolling. We got to get up to speed. We got to start putting things into action. I think as you build confidence, it's going to really build everything else for you. So using Lead Pro is obviously our favorite way to do that. We do update the system Monday through Friday. So as soon as your county reports it, we will then be able to report it to you. So definitely get into Lead Pro, start searching for these leads. And now I'm going to get back to the presentation and show you the rest of the presentation on how we analyze the numbers and how we walk through this process. And I'm going to use this particular property as the example so I can educate you on how to connect all these dots. All right, now that we're back, I want to talk to you about this. What does a homeowner go through? You know, what are some of those attitudes and so forth? You know, some people are just in denial. I've literally called people and said, hi, my name is Chris. We have a perfect phone script for you in REI Pro on pre-foreclosures. And I'd go through that and they're like, I don't have a problem. And I'm like, well, that's not what the county says here. You know, some people just don't want to admit that they're in a problem. They're in a very stressful situation. Of course, keep in mind that by the time it actually goes public, they've already been through this process of missing payments for months now. So this burden has been just sitting on their shoulders and stressing out for months now about this situation. They don't understand the consequences of foreclosure. You know, a lot of times I have to educate people. I think educating people is really the key to this whole business, the more I educate and make people understand. Because think about it, what we do is not normal. And look, I don't want to be normal. If I were normal, then I'd be making what a normal person makes each year. I want to be different, and I have to do things different. And I also understand that I have to be willing to do what others aren't. Okay, so educating these people is really key. Like a lot of people that are facing this situation don't understand that. Look, you may not even pass a rental application because you're going to lose the house. I mean, think about it. If you're a landlord, why in the world would you ever lease your property to somebody that didn't even make payments on their own house? You wouldn't. They could be defensive. They could be proud. Now, what can they do? Now, could they sell their house? We say this all the time. If they have equity, why not just sell the house? See, when people are so worried about this, they need money in order to get out of this situation that they stress about making money, that they can't make money because they're so stressed out about making money. And I know that sounds crazy, but I've been through that stress of making money before. And I want you to think about this. If this were true for every single person that they could sell their house, why would any property with equity ever go to auction? Exactly. People wait. They don't do anything. They have given up. And that's where we need to come in and educate people that there is a solution. What do most people think? Hey, if you are in this foreclosure process, you're done. I mean, you're just, look, I can't make up the payments. I don't want to deal with a realtor, whatever it may be. They sit. And unfortunate, they will lose the house. They could obviously list this property with an agent. Now, a lot of agents that I've seen out there, they say, hey, just do a short sale. Well, a short sale is going to ruin the homeowner's credit for 2 years. I don't see how that's helping this particular person with equity. Now, if they're upside down, yeah, a short sale is definitely going to be better than going through the foreclosure. But a home with equity, to sit there and say short sale is not a solution in my mind. And I get it. I know why realtors do that. It's the simple reason is they don't understand what else to do. They could bring the loan current, but obviously they don't have the money. They don't want to ask their friends or family because they're probably embarrassed about the situation. Some people actually do make a plan with their bank, and some are successful, some aren't. And then obviously they could talk to you about how you can purchase their property. Again, you're not consulting with people. You're not saying, I can help you through the process. The way you help people in this situation is you're going to buy it. Now, when you're wholesaling this, you aren't necessarily the buyer, but at the end of the day, that person that you're selling it to is going to be the buyer. All right, so what do the average people do in this situation? Exactly nothing. Every house that goes to auction, or even just think of every property that's bank owned, they did nothing. And if they did something, it didn't work. Or they listened to the wrong person and it didn't work. They wait till the last minute. And usually that's going to be the bigger case right there, is they wait. It's almost like you try to ignore the problem so you don't have to think about the problem. And then when it becomes too late, now you think about it. And now you're even more stressed out. They continue to sink. They keep quiet. It's not like they're just, like I said before, running outside and telling all the neighbors, hey, you just wanted to let everybody know that, look, I'm behind on payments. I'm being foreclosed on. Look, people are embarrassed. They're in a bad situation. Some people just give up and they don't know what to do. And to me, when you don't know what to do, to me, when you give up, to me, when you do nothing, is a very simple answer. It's because you don't know. And that, again, I'm going to emphasize this. You need to educate people. You need to educate them in the process of how you can buy the house. And I promise you, the more you do that in any strategy, you're going to do more deals. Now, our role as a real estate investor, obviously helping them is buying the property. That is how we help them. Give them some options, build trust, understand their story, and obviously construct a win-win deal. It doesn't always have to be about you. It doesn't always have to be about money. Sometimes it's just about helping somebody else. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to be able to go to bed, you're going to be able to sleep at night, and you're going to be in this business a lot longer if you get the point that it's about helping other people. Now, also keep in mind, though, this is a business, right? So you have to keep that point in mind. Look, I've done deals where I just broke even on. You know why? Because they didn't have any other solution. And you know what? I have to believe that, they're going to go tell 10 other people about me. And I think that's where the snowball effect really came in. It was about doing the business right because so many people just do it wrong. And yet there's such a right way to do it. And helping you with these training videos is definitely going to tell you, hey, look, there is people out there that do this business right. All right. Now, let's start to analyze. Now, let's really start digging into these numbers and how we actually, what information do we even need from the owner? How do we analyze, is this even a potential deal? How do we start connecting the dots? So let's get into what do we need? What do we need to look at? Well, number one is data filing. When was this published? The location, obviously, of the property, which would be the address. The date of the auction, very, very important here because that is the deadline. I want you to think of that as the deadline. And once it gets to that auction date, there's really nothing you can do besides go to auction and buy it, of course, right? But that's not what we're teaching here. I want you to help them out prior to the auction, which ultimately is going to help them out. The amount of the judgment, estimated property value, and what potential equity. So this one property, for those that are in Fort Lauderdale, obviously, this, I'm going to walk you through this real deal if you're paying attention and listening to this video while I'm doing this. But here's the thing. This property, all we know right now has potential equity. We still have to verify stuff, okay? We still have to get a hold of the owner. I see so many people, they will spend all day long looking at the opportunities in Lead Pro and yet do nothing. See, nothing's ever going to happen unless you take action. Look, we got to communicate with the owner. We need to send some direct mail pieces. We need to send them a letter, send them a postcard, put a Post-it note on the door. Somehow we got to get a hold of this person. If they're not living in the property, maybe they've already vacated the property. We need to see if they have a forwarding address. If they don't, maybe I talk to the neighbors. The bottom line here is you need to communicate with the owner because we need information. And you're the only solution to this problem at this point. So we know that this property has at least $160,000 in equity. Sure, there could be some other minor liens or an HOA lien and things of that nature, and we'll find those things out. But why wouldn't this person just put the house up for sale? See, like I said, people wait. They do nothing. I don't really even think about why somebody else doesn't do it. I just see them doing it, and that's all I need to know. And then, hey, I'm going to send you some information, and hopefully I can buy your house. That's my attitude. All right, some of the items that you're going to need to get from the owner. So we've communicated with the owner. You have to get a payoff statement. Do not trust any number anywhere or listen to the owner. Well, I think I owe this much. No, look, we need a current payoff statement. Now, either the homeowner can contact the bank and get this information. You could sign an authorization to release, and you could contact the bank and actually get that information. Either or, we have to get this payoff statement. At the end of the day, we need to know these numbers. You also need to know what the back payments are, what some banks call reinstatement fees. The day we make up the back payments is the day the foreclosure stops, okay? Because now the loan is brought current. So we need to know what that number is because that's the money that's going to need to come out of our pocket. Now, like I said, you're wholesaling this, so you're not going to have to physically come up with those back payments, but the person you're selling it to, that investor, is going to have to. If you're the person that, look, I'm not wholesaling it, I just want to go do this deal myself, then yes, you would need that back payment amount. Comparable sales, check the ARV, which is the after repaired value. What is this property actually worth? And anytime we run this number, you have to run it as what would this property be worth in tip-top shape. You never, ever calculate what a house is worth in its current condition. Nobody ever uses that number except the people that don't have a clue what they're doing. Everything is totally based on what would this property be worth in tip-top shape. And again, we can run comparable sales. You can do that in REI Pro. You can also get with a realtor and so forth. Inspection cost. We need to visit the property. And again, you're going to have to visit the property to communicate with the owner. Communicating with the owner is going to build the relationship. At the end of the day, the relationship is going to be the most valuable thing that you do. They need to trust you. And you need to find out more information. You're going to have a lot more questions like, do you have a place to go? Do you need help to leave? See, some people think that you're coming in and they're going to still live in the house. Well, no, if you haven't made the payments to the bank, why would you ever make payments to me? So the owner has to leave. So there's going to be that communication, but ultimately, find out what needs to be fixed in the property. Go through the inspection process. We have a blank inspection form in REI Pro under Step 3. You can print that out, take it to the property, and fill out that form. Auction date, again, the deadline. Total monthly payment. What are those payments? Because I want you to think about this property that you're going to wholesale or assign to another investor. They're eventually going to have to make up the back payments. And they're going to have to fix up the home so they can put it back on the market, and they're going to have to make the monthly payments until they sell it. Because if they don't make the monthly payments, then it's going to fall back into pre-foreclosure. So we need to get that total monthly payment. Exit strategy. Well, it's simple. If you're wholesaling this to another investor, your exit strategy is to wholesale it. That's it. You don't care what the investor, if they fix it up and sell it, or fix it up and rent it, or fix it up and seller finance it, or fix it up and lease option it. That's irrelevant. But if you are the investor that's not going to wholesale it, you're the one actually going in to do the deal and making up the payments, you need to think about what you need to do with the property once you get the property fixed up. Here's what I recommend and highly suggest. You need to sell these properties as quickly as possible. Keep in mind, you own the house as the investor, okay? But the loan is still in the owner's name. So we want to clear that debt from the owner. And the only way to do that is for you to either buy it for cash, sell it to somebody for cash. And when I say cash, somebody that's going to pay in one lump sum, regardless if it's their cash or the bank's cash, or you could go back and refinance it, okay? So either or, we need to get the loan out of the owner's name as quickly as possible. Now, let's start really connecting these dots now. So let's take this property. I just took a screenshot here today just to kind of help you understand, hey, here, this is a real property. This is not something we're making up. Now, I'm going to use this as an example. No, I have not contacted this owner, so I'm going to use some example numbers as far as repair costs, things of that nature. But we do know the judgment amounts. We don't know the back payments. We don't know what the inspection costs are going to be, but I'm going to use that as an example. All right, so first thing that we do, and one thing that I teach is going through our executable step system. It's really knowing what to do. It's what do we do next? And I want you to, that's what REI Pro was really founded on. And it walks you through this whole entire process. So first thing I want you to do is gather all these numbers. Everything that we just talked about, we need to start gathering and put them on paper, because first we need to even figure out, is this even a deal? Is this one I should even be spending my own time on? Okay, so let's do that. So we know the ARV, and we just took the REI Pro value, which the REI Pro value is taken over a 30-day window of things that have sold. To get a fine-tune ARV, of course you would run comparable sales. We just like to share with you a quick estimated value based on a 30-day window. So let's just use this as the example. The payoff statement, which was the judgment amount, was $259,000. So we do know that amount, but the one thing that we don't know are the back payments. Does that payoff include the back payments, or is that separate? And again, we would find that out with the bank. We would have the owner clarify that, because they're going to send all the paperwork on this. But in this example, I'm just going to say that they are $10,000 behind. Next are inspection costs. Let's say that we visited the property, and just throwing out a number here. And let's say that we calculate the inspection cost to be 20 grand. Maybe it needs new flooring. Maybe we need to take down a wall. Maybe we need to improve the bathrooms and the kitchen. Whatever it may be, we're estimating this to be $20,000. Again, I don't know the monthly payment, again, using this as an example, but when you talk to the owner, you're going to get all this information. Let's just say that it's $1,600 a month. Now, how long do we think that we could get rid of this property? So keep this in mind. Here's the thing. I've got to put this house under contract to buy under these terms. I then have to assign this contract to an investor that's ultimately going to make up the back payments, fix up the property, and sell the house. Now, in this example, I'm just going to estimate this at 3 months. That entire process, I'm going to estimate for 3 months. Why do I need to know that? Because I need to calculate the cost of, especially monthly cost, that the new investor is going to incur when they buy this contract from us. So total monthly payment over 3 months would equal $4,800. So that's $1,600 a month times 3 months. Holding costs. There's obviously going to be holding costs for your new investor. You need to calculate all of these costs that the new investor is going to have. And holding costs is going to be one of those, from utilities to just ongoing maintenance issues and things while the investor is rehabbing the property to put on the market. There will be closing costs and or attorney's fees. Anytime we put a house under contract, we definitely need to go through an attorney. I'm just really estimating this at a pretty high number here of $8,000. Again, this is going to be different for depending on where you live. You know, if you're here in Georgia, we just closed on a house and we paid all of the closing costs for the seller and buyer, and it was $700. But if you're in Texas, or if you're in California, or if you're in New York, you know, these costs are going to vary. So again, you would need to know what those estimated costs are going to be, but you're going to be working with an attorney anyways, because this business, you really do need to have an attorney draw up the paperwork, which we're going to talk about. And now you need to estimate what would the potential profit be for the person you're selling the contract to, because obviously they're not going to buy the house unless they can make money. Now, general rule of thumb, we like to put 15% as our what we call our retailer's profit. So $62,000 an estimated profit. Now, when you calculate all of these expenses, so you have the judgment amount. This is what the bank wants as a payoff. You have the back payments. You have the inspection costs all the way down. It's going to equal $368,000. Now, we still have equity in this property, $50,000. Right? So if you took the $419 minus the $368, you're going to have $50,000. Now, the only number we haven't calculated when you're wholesaling this is your cost. What is your fee for assigning this deal over to someone that's going to ultimately buy it, rehab it, and all that good stuff? In this example, I'm going to use $20,000. Now, you could simply say, hey, I'm going to assign this for the $50,000. But here's the thing. You could. Yes, you could. But here's where you're going to probably run into a problem. If you put this house under contract to wholesale to someone else, and you're making $50,000 and your investor is only making $62,000, there's that perception of, look, you ain't making that much money off me, boy. So keep it at a fair number here, because if you totaled that out, you'd still have $30,000 left over. Now, that could go towards many different things. I want you to think about this. Could you offer to pay the moving expenses to the owner? Sure. Could you give the owner some profit when the retailer sells the property? Sure. How about give more money to the retailer? I mean, the more money you give to that investor, they're going to do this deal in a heartbeat. Could you use an agent to sell the house? You got to look at all these other potential. You want room for error. You want room to negotiate. And that's where I want you to just keep this number realistic. Think about it. You have not put any money into this property, and still you're going to make $20,000. I mean, what's the return on investment on that? Okay, so keep this at a real reasonable number, because it's going to leave a lot of negotiation room. It's going to leave maybe your retailer that comes in says, hey, Chris, I know you estimated $20,000 in repairs, but my guy says it's going to be 28. Okay, so you've got some room to play with, and that's my whole point. You're still going to profit $20,000 the day you assign this deal over to that new investor. So that's what you need to look at. And at the same time, you're helping the homeowner. and you're helping a lot of other people, which we're going to talk about. Okay. Now the contract. So once we negotiate this deal with the owner, and generally just if you were to keep it simple, you're just going to take over the current loan balance, maybe pay the seller a little bit to move, and that would be generally it. Again, depending on motivation. But could we pay the seller some money after we close on this deal? Sure, you could, because there's some room left over in this. But at the end of the day, this contract has to go through an attorney. Okay, do not think that this is something you want to play around with. You need to have the correct language. And at the end of the day, the attorney has to print up the deed anyways. So I always like to try to close these deals with real estate attorneys that do closing. So I would definitely research that as well. Now, what we have to have when you're wholesaling this is the right to assign or sell the interest of this contract. Here's a couple of examples. Chris Goff and or signs. Technically, you don't have to put that in the agreement with the seller, but if you want to just make it, more disclosed, I guess, then you could put it in there. But just so you know, every real estate contract in the world is assignable unless it says you can't. Okay. Now, most realtor contracts are not going to allow you to assign or sell the interest of this deal. But again, have an attorney draw this up, guys. Do not mess. Look, this is a business. You do not want to mess with other people. You want to do it the right way. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, your out clause, right? Your contingency clause is the second example, subject to my financial partner's approval, meaning that if you sign this deal with the owner and you cannot find that buyer to do this deal prior to the auction date, then sorry. At least you tried. Look, they were going to lose the house anyways. So if you buy it right, though, it's going to be easy to sell. I see so many people, they just buy them wrong. They put them under contract at a bad number. And when you have a bad number, it's hard to sell to that next investor, and it could take time. Again, you want to build your investors list up, and when you run across these properties and package these deals together, hey, you just pick up the phone and say, hey, Steve, I've got this property at so-and-so address. Here's the deal. Hey, Mike, I've got this property. Hey, Susie, I've got this property. And you've got a go-to list of investors that you could call on, and I promise you they're going to love you for it, because this is an awesome way to not just make money in this business. Number one, not many people know how to do this business. And number three, you're going to help out a ton of people. So the type of contract, again, you're going to need a wraparound. There's going to be other documents that the attorney's going to need to draw up, such as the deed. So have them handle all of this. In REI Pro, we do have a list of about 15,000 different title companies / attorneys. You can find this in Step 9 under any property. So executable Step 9. Now, selling your contract. Now it's time to find that investor that wants to buy your contract, and again, marketing. And this is a point that maybe I want to stress a little bit, because I don't want you to do this wrong. We don't want you to get in trouble, obviously. You need to have a current list of investors, kind of your go-to list. This isn't something you want to put in the newspaper, okay? You really want to go to your go-to list of investors, because if you do advertise in more of a public setting, then you would need to disclose that you're selling the contract. You're not legally selling the house, okay? But have a list of investors go to. Now, where do you find these investors? Well, if you're part of a RIA or a meetup club, there's going to be investors there that are looking to buy. And generally, most people that attend these sessions are typically wholesaling. So you're going to eliminate all the competition just by walking in and say, hey, I've got a package deal. They're in pre-foreclosure. It's going to cost you this much to do. It's going to be less expensive. You're going to make just as much profit, and you can do it quickly. Every investor that's looking to buy is going to want to know what in the world you are doing, and they're going to want a piece of that pie. I promise you. You start building relationships with these people, you're going to have that go-to list in no time. Okay, some of the headlines that I like to do. So I'll put up some marketing material that I market to my current list. And these are just some of the headlines that I've used, and I wanted to share them with you so you could use them. Takeover payments, which is kind of cool. It's like a seller finance headline that we use, but sending this to an investor really grabs their attention because it's not the typical handyman special type of headline. Time-sensitive investment opportunity. So I like this one a lot as well. Just the simple fact that it's going to make you read it, right? So if you're that investor and maybe you get an email from me, maybe I email you a flyer, whatever it may be, this is a really good one. Save thousands before it goes to auction. See, a lot of investors think that it has to go to auction before they can even buy it. And you're going to educate these investors as well as educating the owners, and you're kind of that little niche out there. Smarter investment opportunity. I always like to use the word smarter. It's almost like I know something you don't when I use that word. So I like to use smarter in a lot of different things that we market. So there's a few ideas. Now, once you find this investor and you give them the numbers, you give them the terms of the agreement, now we need to assign this contract. You can simply just use this single page. You don't need this long drawn out assignment of contract, but use this. It's already in REI Pro. We give it away for you for free. All you have to do is just go up to my office section, go to hit the contracts, and you'll see the assignment. All you got to do is just download that, fill in the information, and then assign this deal. Sure, you could do a double close on this deal, but a lot of times it's just going to cost everybody more money. Now, if you're going to make a fortune on this assignment, of course you would do a double close. But in this case, look, it's only 20 grand. There's still 30,000 to play with. And on top of that, the investor's going to make 62 grand. Okay, so that's a lot of money for a house that they didn't have to go find and package this whole thing. Because I promise you, most investors have no clue what to even say to these types of owners, or even where do you even find these people and how to even package these deals. So for you to take the time to do that much work to make 20 grand is a no-brainer to someone that is going to make a fortune. Okay, so you could just use this assignment of contract to just kind of sum this whole thing up. What are we really doing? We have a motivated seller. You're going to put this house under contract. You're going to assign that contract over to the investor. And obviously, that's the person that's going to make up the 10 grand in back payments. They're the ones that are rehabbing the house. They're the ones that are going to put it on the market. They're going to sell it. And when they sell it, of course, they're going to probably find a qualified buyer to sell it to. And then guess what happens? That particular loan is going to say, okay, it's got to pay off the first lien on the property, which would be the homeowner's current loan. And it's going to pay off all those other expenses. And that's where the investor is actually going to profit, where you're actually going to profit when you assign this deal over to them. So pretty cool. So closing your deal. Again, you have a signed contract with both the seller and the new buyer. So you have the terms laid out. You're going to have your attorney draw this up with the seller. And then you're going to have what's called an assignment of contract with your new buyer. So ultimately, you have what's called two agreements. You can then take those two agreements to the title company, or like I prefer, to go to a closing attorney, an attorney that actually does closings, and they're going to actually close this deal. Now, we'll just answer a few things here. Why would an investor want to do this? And there's obviously a lot of reasons. I'm just going to highlight some of these. Less out-of-pocket expenses. And what do I mean by this is, now out of their pocket, now keep in mind, they're not going to pay off the loan, but they could pay off the loan. They could just go buy the house, but it's going to cost them more money. If they did it this way, they're actually going to save some money out of their own pocket. I want you to think about all the costs that need to come out. Number one, we have to make up the back payments, right? We have to have repair costs. We've got to fix the property up. Of course, we've got to make the monthly payments until the property sells. There's going to be some holding costs, closing costs, and your assignment fee. That investor would only have to come up with $65,000 out of their pocket to do this deal, okay? Now, if they were getting traditional financing on that total debt, not the ARV, now they could do it on the ARV and refinance it, but just on that total debt, which would be the judgment amount and all of these expenses added up, they would have to put 20% down, by far, okay? And that 20% comes out to a higher number than if they just did this deal with you and structured it this way. So there's going to be less out-of-pocket expenses. It doesn't show up on their credit report. See, every time you apply for a loan, it shows up in your credit report. We're not actually applying for a loan. The investor is not applying for a loan. They're taking over the payments. They're having the property deeded to them. They're fixing it up and reselling it, and everybody's happy. Less competition. Hopefully, I've clarified. Most people don't even know how to do this business, so you have less competition. You can teach them and show multiple ways to make money with this property. Not only, I prefer my investors to go ahead and sell these properties as quickly as possible just to pay off that original loan on there. So there's no, we just want to cut through the tape here, keep everything clean. But at the end of the day, could the investor rent the property out? Could they lease option it? Could they sell or finance it? They could do all of these multiple ways of getting rid of the property after they've already made up the back payments and so forth. There's more potential profit in these deals than their average typical wholesale deal, because generally a wholesale deal is you buy a house at a wholesale price, which is generally distressed property, which is probably the lowest percentage of properties in the U.S. So you're actually working with an entirely completely bigger market. You're working with a nice houses in nice neighborhoods that people unfortunately go through this process. You could be working in the multi-million-dollar areas that unfortunately people go through this process. It's all over. And that opens up a much bigger marketplace for you. And if you can do that for investors, man, they're going to love you for it. You can make a fortune doing this. They could easily refinance the property. Let's say they made up the back payments. They were deeded the house, right? Because they're not going to make up the back payments until the house is deeded to them. So they own the house. Even though the loan is still in the owner's name, they own the house. They could go refinance the property because it wouldn't be considered a new loan because they already own the house. So then, of course, if during that refinance, that would pay off the existing loan on the property. This is another great way to pull out cash. So you could educate your buyer that, hey, look, if you're in a position to refinance this property, let's make up the back payment, stop the foreclosure. That is priority number one, because as soon as it goes to auction, we can't help them. They could go back and refinance this if they choose to do that. Now, it's really about all helping people. I want you to think about all the people in this transaction that we help. Think about the current bank that was forcing, they're the ones going through this foreclosure process. A lot of people don't know that if they took this bank back, let's say it went to auction, nobody bought the property at auction and the property was taken back, every dollar a bank takes back, they can't loan out $3 in car loans, personal loans, mortgages, and so forth. Banks cannot make money by taking properties back. They have to be what's called liquid. They make money by loaning people money, not by taking back the collateral. The attorneys that work for the bank, now they're getting paid. You fix this problem simply by making up the back payments. Not you personally because you're wholesaling it, but the person that you're selling it to did. What about the attorney title company that you're actually going to close this deal at? Did you have to pay them? Did they do title searches? They got to do all of these things, and they get paid to do that. What about the contractors that actually fixed up the home? Did you help them out? What about the homeowner? Obviously, you just saved their credit. Sure, there might be some dings with some late payments, but at least they didn't go through a short sale or a foreclosure all the way through to bank-owned, because that would damage their credit up to 2 years on a short sale, 7 to 10 years on the entire foreclosure process. How about the new investor? Heck yeah, they're going to profit all kinds of money by coming in and selling this property to a new buyer. What about you? You made $20,000 on this transaction. What about the neighbors and the values of the properties? The last thing, you have this situation where someone's in pre-foreclosure, they let the house go because they don't have money to maintain it. They probably have vacated the property, and now your neighbors, have to look at it every day. And if they have a property up for sale and people are driving by, it's like, oh, what happened to that house? So it really does help the neighbors and the values of the property. What about other potential liens or companies that had a lien on this? In this particular case, we're not for sure. I didn't use that as an example here. But if you would have to pay off those liens as well. It's going to help them out as well. And the end buyer who's actually going to live in the property. You realize how many people you've helped because you know how to do it, where most people don't. You really do affect a lot of people out there, and it's a much needed service to go out there and help these people. Look, I get it. You can't help everybody, but to make 20 grand and the investor could make a lot of money. I mean, really, how many of these deals do you really need to do a year to replace your current income? And just think, if you were the investor, forget about the wholesaler, you were the investor that found the deal, made up the back payments, how much profit you would have made on this deal. It's a home run situation. It happens every day. You just have to know how to connect the dots, and I'm hoping that this is starting to connect these dots on how to do this, regardless if you have money or not. So I just want to quickly recap this. Obviously, you need to, if you don't know how to wholesale a property, that's going to be first things first. And we do have a training series that you could go through, and I break this down so simple. I mean, a 10-year-old would understand how to do this business. You just need to take action with it. I think that's what holds most people back. It's that fear. It's that self-confidence. They just don't have it. And I get it. Look, you're learning something new. It's scary, right? But there's no real estate jail out there. And if you aren't going to do it, someone else will. So get out there and learn this information. I promise you it's going to not just change your life, it will change the lives of so many other people out there. You have to learn seller financing. Get the gist of it. You don't have to be an expert at these, but I need you to understand the foundation of how it works. Okay, I don't care if you've never done a wholesale deal before. I don't care if you've never done a seller finance deal. I never knew how to do these deals until I actually did it. Right? And I learned a lot from it. Yes, you're going to make some mistakes. But at the end of the day, we don't want to make a financial mistake. And that's where we have the disclosures in there. So you, just in case you ran the numbers wrong, just in case you did this, but you're going to learn so much more by going through this process than any amount of money you could have made on the deal. And I've always said that for every deal that I made, is you always learn something new to get better. Always get the payoff statement. Never trust the seller, okay? Make sure you get the payoff statement. Find a competent attorney to draft up the paperwork. You simply Google them. You can go into REI Pro. We have a list of them there. And find out if they've ever done contracts like this or ever done deals like this before. That's usually my first question to an attorney. Because if they've never done it before, then you're paying them to learn how to do it, and they're going to charge you for it. It's going to take them more time. They're going to charge you per hour. So you do need to find someone that actually has done this before. Only work with properties. Again, it's kind of a general rule here with at least 20% equity. You can't help the others with this way. Okay, you still could short sale and you could do other things, but the way I'm teaching you how to do it this way, work with properties with 20%. Review new leads each week in REI Pro. Never, ever, biggest tip I'm going to give you on this page probably, never pay the owner moving money until they've cleaned the house and vacated the home. How do you think I know that? That's right, it happened to me. I sat there and gave the lady $6,000 to move, and she wouldn't move. Here, I've made up the back payments. I've paid her moving money, and she wouldn't leave the house. And here, I'm making the monthly payments on the house because I've got all this money invested in the deal, and I've got to continue this. I had to eventually take the lady to court. The judge evicted her, and everything worked out. But big tip here, don't pay people until they've actually done what they say they're going to do. Direct mail is usually the best way to contact the owners, either by a postcard or letter. Always, if you have bigger volume, try postcard. Small volume, I would use a letter. Keep it as personal as you can when you do use letters. Don't make it the typical cheesy, sleazy, we pay cash in 24 hours bull crap, okay? Most people think it's already a scam. They don't believe people like that. And again, you want to come across professional. You want to come across in a way that, hey, I can help you. And the way I can help you is actually buy your property. Again, your goal is to help them, okay? You are not consulting with them. Don't ever, ever use that word. You need to just remove that word from your vocabulary. Okay, anytime you come across as you're consulting and you can help them get through this process, and by consulting, you're going to fall into what's called that foreclosure scam. Because look, guys, there are people out there, and especially investors, that do it wrong. And they do it wrong. I always say people do it wrong because they don't know how to do it right. And they were taught by somebody that did it wrong, and you think that's the way it should be until you compare yourself to somebody that's actually doing it right. So don't use that out of there. So here's a little just timeline for you. So search for pre-foreclosures, and then we're going to contact the owner. Again, you could do that in various different ways. Run the numbers. Let's make sure that this is even a deal, because if you looked at even running the basic numbers, we had equity. Next, you want to have the contract signed between you and the owner as though you're buying it under those terms, whatever their payoff, whatever their back payment amount is, their monthly payments. We're going to disclose all this. Again, having an attorney draft this up is going to make it easy. Now we want to assign this to an investor, preferred investor that's on your list. I shared with you some ideas on how to meet these people, and then ultimately we want to close this transaction. Again, I prefer an attorney that does closings. So that's a general timeline. Again, walk through those executable steps in REI Pro. It's going to help you maneuver through there. I hope this has really shed some light on this particular topic. I've never done this type of training before. Again, I do teach pre-foreclosures, seller financing, lease options, wholesaling, and all those good things. We generally teach this at our live events. But if in case you can't make it at the live event, hopefully this training video is going to help you really get out there and understand that there's a big market for this, and it doesn't take that many deals to do well. It doesn't require you to work full-time to do well either. And again, I always appreciate people and love people that are just getting started, because who helps those people, right? So I love doing that if you're just getting started in this business. You can learn more about us at myreipro.com. Again, we have software education. We do live events. Thank you so much, guys. I know it's a little extended training for you, but I really hope this helped you out, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next training video.